Hey, Matt.
Yes, Ryan.
I'm on my feet. I'm on the floor. I'm good to go. Now, all I need is just to hear a song I know.
Sounds like you're about to have a good time.
Oh, heck yeah. And you know what else?
What else?
I feel like y'all should listen to this. Oh! Alright, and welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. I am the one, the only, Ryan Kearns.
Make sure you don't check the yellow pages. He's being honest about that. I am the one and only Matt Durzik that you can check the yellow book for because I'm curious.
And essentially what we do here is every week, me and Matt take turns picking an album that we're going to dissect, A to Z. It could be as thorough as, we're going to discuss the metaphysical elements of the composition of the synthesizer in the third verse, or we could just be as simple as, this literally does nothing for me. Let's move on. So, and this week, it was my turn to pick for the first time in a month, 5 months, 7 months. And I decided to go, I actually pulled a page out of Matt's book, and I had him choose between if we were going to go to Arizona or we were going to go to Nebraska, and he chose Arizona. Are you still happy with that decision, or do you wish we would have went to Nebraska?
No, I am happy we went to Arizona because it means we're going to be talking about one of the... I didn't realize until I listened to this, one of the more defining power pop anthems of the last 25 years.
Oh, yeah, and that song that Matt's referring to is The Middle, which is... such an iconic rock song. It transcends the band, and it's been covered at numerous live shows. Heck, even when I went to go see Shinedown, they covered it out of all bands. But I digress. So that being said, yes, this week we are talking about one, the only, the Eater of Worlds, Jimmy Eat World, and the album that we are covering this week is Bleed American. So before we kick it off, Matt, what was your relationship with Jimmy Eat World before diving into Bleed American?
Well, you kind of covered half of it, which is The Middle. As far as entirely, really I only knew them for a couple of songs, particularly The Middle and another song off this album, Sweetness. I really had not delved into their discography really at all before this episode. And I know that for the fact, to me, they were always just one of those bands from the 90s that had one of those weird 90s names. Jimmy Eat World, the Goo Goo Dolls, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I just sort of grouped it all into this glob of 90s. And that's still not completely untrue at this point, but again, really didn't dig into their discography until this episode, and even then I've only listened to this one album, but from what I've heard, we're gonna have a lot to talk about today in regards to the band legally known as James Eat World.
And for those of you who are wondering, how did Jimmy Eat World come up with their name? I learned this through a quick YouTube video from the YouTube channel Punk Rock MBA. Essentially, the way that they came up with that name is that there was a friend or family member who did a drawing, and it was literally of someone eating a world. And the title of that drawing was Jimmy Eat World. So, there's no other, deeper meaning beyond that. I mean, let's face it, it was the 90s, there was a whole lot of not deep meaning behind, music names and band names and all that good jazz.
Exactly. And that's why the 90s were as crazy and weird as they were, because it seemed like nobody cared.
Yeah. So, no, if enough jibber jabber. I feel like it's ready. We're ready to go and kick this album review off. So I'm gonna actually let you take the opening track here, "Bleed American."
Okay. Bleed American is well, for most of its history, the title track of this album. And the reason I say most of the history is because, as I learned in researching this album, the album was not always called Bleed American. It was released in the summer of 2001 as Bleed American. Then it was changed to Jimmy Eat World because 9/11. And then I think it was around 2007 or 8 they reverted back to Bleed American because they felt enough time had passed. So depending on what copy of the album you have, this is the title track. And in any case, it is the opening track, and it is a powerful starter to the record. Just really coming out of the gate, not just with a sonic force that is very definitively power pop, but also lyrics that I wasn't sure what they were about. I have in my notes, it's either about Americana or romance, both with question marks next to them. But at the same time, the song I compared this to most would be Longview by Green Day, because that song was very much also about sort of feeling like you're in this sort of everyday rut of, the same old, same old. So I definitely saw a lyrical comparison. Sound-wise, though, I don't know if I could find much of a comparison. I mean, this is a pretty solid and, for the time, relatively unique sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk about the sound and just the way that this track kicks off the album. It is absolute perfection, in my honest and humble opinion. Like that guitar riff that kicks everything off, it is just so good. And like I was thinking about this song a couple of days ago, specifically like how in the past episodes that we've done, when we did the FX Pink Tape review, if I'm not mistaken, Jamie, my wife, said that the song Signal is her driving away and after a bad breakup, or that kind of jazz. I could be mistaken there. And then when we did the Toby Keith episode, we talked about the song Drive It On Home. That's basically your driving song. This song right here, Bleed American, is my driving song. It is impossible for me not to get the urge to just slam on that gas pedal whenever this song kicks off, because it's just so powerful and so anthematic.
It really, really is, and especially on the hook, which talks about how I think the original title for this track, even because I forgot about this, they actually changed the name of this track along with the album. I think it was Salt, Sweat, and Asphalt or something like that. But what it invokes in that hook is just this powerful feeling of, putting your life out on the streets and, what do you get in return for it? And it's a very, in a sense, it's almost akin to the same type of lifestyle that Bruce Springsteen was very much trying to escape from on Born to Run. Not that this is in the same orchestral vein as Born to Run, but it's definitely got the same attitude and drive.
Yeah. So, going a little bit further into the lyrical and the messaging aspects of this song here. So, the opening verse, where Jim Adkins, the lead singer, is talking about, "I'm not alone because the TV's on, and he's not crazy because he takes the right pills every day." That was more self-reflective of his mindset whenever they were touring off their previous album, Clarity. And he was just going through such panic attacks during that time, and this is just him putting pen to paper on what his mindset is during that time. And then also I just love the line in the chorus, "Sign up, it's the picket line or the parade." And that whole chorus is just basically about the angst that people can feel about the American life, life or slash dream. And also, something I didn't notice until I actually did a lyrical deep dive into this song here. It's basically the same verse and the same chorus repeated in and out. Like, it doesn't change up at all. And I mean, you get the little change up in the bridge, but that speaks to the execution of the performance, the lyrics, and just the overall just composition of a song where it can actually hold my attention, and I don't notice that until I actually think about it for a second. The only quick comparison that I can make to that is the Weeknd song "I Can't Feel My Face." Like, it's a weird comparison to make, but I feel like it works out well.
Yeah, it does. I understand where you're coming from with that. And one final note from me on this song: you mentioned how it talks about the line of, the picket line or the parade. I think it also reflects a type of extremism that feels more relevant now today than ever, where, you feel like you're in the situation where you have to make a decision, and you have to make either the decision to fight against everything that is coming at you or follow along with it in the parade. And again, I especially with what was to happen a couple months later and everything that we've been dealing with since with the rise of social media, again, that lyric is ahead of its time in saying, you must fight to choose for what is right. Not that that hasn't happened before in history, but definitely feels just as prevalent now as it did back in 2001.
Absolutely. So, one final note, incredibly minor note about this track, and then we'll move on to a praise chorus. This is my third favorite song off the album, right away.
Really? I would agree with that, actually. I think this is gonna be my third favorite as well, because I knew this was in my top 3, and I had to think about for a hot second. I was like, where in the top 3 is it? And I think this is number 3 for me.
All right, cool. I will bet you my 401k that you cannot guess my number 1 favorite song, because it wasn't my number 1 favorite song until I actually took a look into the story behind it, and I'm like, oh no, this gets up there.
I probably won't guess it, but I will take a guess to say that your top 3 and my top 3 will have at least one difference.
Yeah, we'll see what the rest of the review brings us. So, that being said, it is time to move on to a praise chorus. So, we go from Bleed American, which is just a slap you in the face with a feral pig kind of song, to more of a traditional, just a rock song. And I absolutely love that transition, because you can't have every single song go at 110 miles per hour. I mean, we literally just discussed this in the Public Enemy episode. So the way that they show off their two kind of styles, it does show to the compositional strengths of Jimmy Eat World. So overall, this song is just such a good time, man. The way that I just picture how this song was written, it was trying to get people into the mindset of, hey, you're in a crowd in a concert, and you're kind of shy, you don't know how it feels, you want to get into the music, but you don't want to be you don't want to make a fool out of yourself, and it works out so well. I love the a couple areas in the song that I really, really love is the stuttering that occurs in the verses. I mean, I can pull up the lyrics, but that works out so well. And then even in the chorus, where the lead singer does that little offbeat rhythm, it is such a nice touch.
It is a nice touch, and I tend to agree with you for the most part. That the fact that this does switch things up a little bit, sort of dials things back without losing momentum, is a good move by the band. The only argument I can come up with against it is that the ways in which they do go 100 miles per hour are so good that you listen to a song like this, and while it's certainly not bad, it's a very good song too, it doesn't have quite that same level of like etched in stone type of yes that some of the other songs have. I will say though, the one thing I did take away from this song that I liked the most was that it kind of follows up the lyrical theme of Bleed American very well. Because this song is again about ambition and feeling like you have to do something. It's basically the response saying, I have to do something, I have to get out of this life that I'm in. And it does so with, a strong, conviction in its lyrics. The only issue I have with this song is the Crimson and Clover reference towards the end of the song. It's not terrible, but it doesn't really need to be there. Now, you may have more insight onto why they said that.
Yeah.
But just from the untrained ear, the unresearched ear, which I'll fully admit to being here, I just heard that. I was kind of like, okay, you've heard this song. That's cool.
So, let's talk about that bridge. I am so glad that you brought up that Crimson and Clover over and over part, because if I didn't take the time to dive a little further in to this track here, that whole bridge section would just be completely lost to me. So to the untrained ear, like you said, and even my ear was untrained, but I'm never going to think about this bridge again after being trained, so to speak. But that being said, we are looking at Crimson and Clover over and over, which you might be aware that it was covered by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Yes.
And then one of the other sets of lyrics in the bridge is Our House in the Middle of the Street, which is a reference to Our House by a band called Madness. Then the next song that's referenced is Why Did We Ever Meet, which it was a song by The Promise Ring. Why Did We Ever Meet? And then the next song that's referenced is Rock and Roll Fantasy by Bad Company. Started my rock and roll fantasy. And then the next song that's referenced is Don't Let's Start by They Might Be Giants, which the lyric that's used to reference that is Don't Let's Start. And then the next song that's referenced is All of My Everythings by The Promise Ring. And the lyric that references that song is Why Did We Ever Part? And in the song All of My Everythings, the lyrics that is taken from there is Why did we ever part and give back our hands? Why did we ever part? And then the last song that's referenced in this gauntlet of, references here, references upon references, is Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue. And the lyric in the praise chorus in the bridge that is referencing that is Kickstart My Rock and Roll Heart. So that was a lot of song references in such a short span of time. To the untrained ear, it would be what's the point of this? But this is legitimately the lead singer being these are songs that mean a lot to me. And these are potential songs that I actually heard in concerts, and they got me to go. They got me to break out of my shell.
So 2 follow-ups to what you just said there. Because there's 2 references that came to my mind while you were saying all that. One of them, have you seen the movie Almost Famous?
Yes.
Okay. So that kind of reminded me of one of the opening scenes in that film where the bigger sisters go into his brother saying, look under your bed, it'll free your mind. And all those records that he discovers just, open his mind up to rock and roll. The other one... This is a little off the beaten path, but from the Avenue Q soundtrack, the song Mixtape, which more directly is meant to name drop a bunch of songs, and much like this song, it kind of goes all over the place. Because there's some friendship songs, and there's some love songs, and then there's just a bunch of songs there for the sake of being there and being obscure and weird. So I would recommend that to anyone who really, really liked this track. I'm not one of them. I thought it was okay. I thought it was good.
One last note about this track here, and then we can move on to the middle. So in the outro of this track, there's a lyric that says, so come on, Davy, sing me something that I know." The Davy that's referenced here is Davy Von Boland. I might be grossly mispronouncing that last name. I apologize to anybody who is just extremely angry at me right now. I'm a human being after all. But that Davy person is the lead singer of The Promise Ring, which, for those of you who are keeping track on how many Promise Ring songs were referenced in that bridge, it was quite a few. And this Davy person actually provides background vocals in several spots in this song here. So I thought that was an incredibly nerdy thing that I really did appreciate. Overall, fantastic song. I love how this song feels with like just the overall energy and several spots that make it stand out, especially with that like upbeat chorus and then that little stuttering that happens in the verses. Obviously, I nerded out over all the several references in the bridge, and especially considering that the lead singer of The Promise Ring packs Jim Adkins up here. Like, again, I love this song. It's not one of my top 3, so it's still a very good song.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty solid, but I think it does. It's a good second track, but it's not a standout track in regards to the album as a whole. Which, that being said, you want to move on to the middle?
Yeah, and I'll let you take the middle here.
I will take the middle here. This song really doesn't a whole lot need to be said about it. I would say there's probably a good chunk of people on this earth, and certainly in this country, that probably don't know any Jimmy Eat World song, but they know this song because they've heard it. And that's the kind of song that this is. Very popular hit, probably the most popular hit for the band, and for good reason too. It's a very upbeat track. The chorus is just fantastic. It's just a good, fun, driving song. Lyrically, though, it does flip things over a little bit. Because, as I mentioned before with Bleed American, and to an extent Praise Chorus as well, I wasn't sure if those were songs about ambition towards romance, or ambitions towards being a rock star, or careerism, whatever the case may be. And if we're assuming that it's romance, then this feels like a self-warning song to the band. Like, this is a warning to, obviously we know the lyrics. It just takes some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride, everything's going to be just fine. And, the lyrics saying, don't give yourself away. It just feels like it's a song warning girls about guys being guys or life being life, which feels like the theme of the first 2 songs. I might be disappearing on my own rear end on this one, but that's the vibe I kind of got.
That's an interesting take on it, man. And the only kind of take that I was able to walk away from it after doing like some research came simply from the fact that I discovered that the band wrote this song after they got dropped from their label that did Clarity. So they had a lot of unsure feelings, but they wrote this song as a way to reassure themselves of, hey, everything's just going to be okay. Don't give yourself away. Don't remain true to who you are. And actually, fun fact about this album as a whole, they wrote Bleed American with the mindset of they didn't want to experiment nearly as much as they did on Clarity. So in a nutshell, Bleed American is the most straightforward Jimmy Eat World album, which is an interesting thing to think about, considering even the couple of tracks that we nerded out about so far. If this is the most straightforward Jimmy Eat World album, what else do they have to offer, if you know what I mean?
I will say the fact that you just mentioned this being a song about them that they wrote,
yeah,
does make the lyrics a little more interesting, because they say don't give yourself away, and they refer to the character or the protagonist of the song as little girl. So they succeeded. They did not, in fact, give themselves away. So props to them for pulling that off.
Yeah. I mean, the only other thing that I'll mention about the metal here is that guitar solo is absolutely iconic, and it is so classic. And even like the lyrics as a whole, like for those of you who have moments of self-doubt and are not really sure about what you're doing with your life, like you put this track on, you'll start to feel a little bit better about yourself, being like, hey, it's just life, man. It will throw you for a ride, but you just have to like hang in there and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, but even then, that's insofar as you listen to. I mean, and that's one of the greater things about this song is that, unlike some other pop songs where you can sort of disregard the lyrics, like it's engineered so clearly that you're pretty well in tune with what the lyrics are and how they go. Now, this might shock you, but this is not in my top 3.
It's not in my top 3 either.
No? Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, it is a classic song, but when we get to the second favorite and the first favorite track songs here, like when I explain it, you'll understand why. And like I'm pretty sure that you'll have good explanations for like your other top 2 tracks here. But it's interesting that both of us did not put The Middle as one of our favorites.
Yeah. I would say if I were to do a ranking like top to bottom, this would probably be number 4. So just outside the top 3. And it's really just because the other 3 songs I think are better. They're a lot more fun, and I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it got edged out by some heavyweights on this album.
One last thing, and then we'll move on to Your House. It's an interesting thing that a lot of diehard Jimmy Eat World fans will tell you that The Middle is actually one of their worst songs because it is so formula. Like it basically follows a cut and dry formula. I'm not of that mindset. I don't think it's one of the worst songs, but I mean, I can understand how you would appreciate several other songs to a greater deal and extent. But knowing that they wrote this song in response to being dropped from their label and their mindset writing Bleed American as a whole album, it gives The Middle a little bit of a pass, which is a weird sentence for me to say. But that being said, you ready to move on to Your House?
I am ready to move on to Your House, which is a great transition out of you admitting that The Middle is not their worst song, because I think this song is actually worse.
Oh, we're in agreement, man. And for me, this song here, which is Your House, it would be not such a horrible song if it wasn't for one lyric that keeps getting repeated and repeated and repeated. And it's almost like, okay, so in the last episode we talked about Public Enemy and their horns that just drove me absolutely crazy. At least in those tracks, there was other things for me to gravitate on, and the horns wasn't as prevalent. Like this, the lyric that I'm referencing here is where the lead singer says, "You rip my heart right out. You rip my heart right out." That line is such cringe, dude. I tried to make it happen. When I first did my detailed listening of this album here for our episode that we're doing here today, I was just like, no, yeah, man, hey, this works. Then I woke up the next morning, I'm like, but does it really? And it doesn't, man. It's for that fact alone that this song is easily my least favorite song off the album. And I would probably say it's my there's another Jimmy Eat World song that they came out with within the past, like, I think, like 5 years that hasn't grown on me. But yeah, this is probably my least favorite Jimmy Eat World song as a whole, if I could be honest with you.
I'm not gonna say that because it's not even my least favorite song on this album. And honestly, I'll disagree with you to a certain extent that that line going over and over and over again didn't bother me as much because unless the lyric is like jaw-droppingly awful and confusing and just why did you write that on paper, if it gets repetitive, and especially in a song like this, I'm just gonna ignore it. And that to me, the biggest problem with this song is just how the lyrical content and the tone of the song do not mesh up at all. It's a sad song. I think is about a breakup. It kind of sounds like a proto emo song or a very early emo song, but it's upbeat. It's like it's got. I think it's got like a shuffle beat to it, and you have the background vocals being like call and response. But the lyrics are just about being sad and I don't know. From that's what turned me off about this song. It's not my least favorite, but I just the something like this should be this poppy, and considering what they do later on the album, and they kind of do it right. I don't know. This one didn't do it for me.
I'm extremely curious to see what your least favorite track is off this album, because like I would say outside of Your House, like every other track on here, I don't really have any quips with. So this is going to be a very curious remainder of this review here. But like, I don't know, like I don't mind the contrasting styles between like, the actual music that's going on and then the lyrical content. I mean, we've had a couple different examples of how that's worked well in the past with different reviews that we've done. And I think when I hear this song, it reminds me of like their work in their previous album Clarity, and overall, like the song works for me. Like, so moving outside of the cringe, "You Rip My Heart Right Out" lyric, the chorus here, I like how it has like organs underlaying like the whole song. And like after the second chorus, the band kicks it up a notch, and yeah, I mean, there's not a lot here, in my opinion, other than "You Rip My Heart Right Out." And I apologize for sounding redundant in my explanation for trying to defend this song, which is a weird sentence for me to say, considering I said like this is my least favorite song off the album. But this is where we're at, man.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to add about this. Again, to me, it's just kind of a meh track, and really kind of the first track that doesn't really work on the album.
And that's incredibly sad, considering that we just went through a gauntlet of, like, in my opinion, we went through Bleed American, which is perfect, A Praise Chorus, which is a great track, then we went into The Middle, which is an iconic track, then we get to Your House, and it's just like, wait, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, as much as I would like to make this song happen, if they remove You Rip My Heart Right Out and change it up with anything else that isn't just so emo boy cringe, maybe my opinion would change. But my opinion, I tried to make this song happen for me. I couldn't do it, man.
That's fair. So that being said, do you want to move on to Sweetness?
Yes, and I think it is your turn to lead off the track.
It is my turn, and I have heard this song in different capacities over the course of the last week, probably about a dozen times, because not only have I done the research for this album, which I've heard it, and have since bought the album through digital download, I have also started watching Pirates Baseball, and anyone who watches Pirates Baseball will know that Jared Triolo uses this as his walk-up music. So I've heard that as many times during the course of this last few days. And honestly, I like it because this is my favorite song on the album. This is number one for me. Because much like The Middle, it is a power pop staple in the lexicon for a good reason. And to me, this is just pure pop rock, pure power pop. Especially to the point where I didn't really think until like the third listen, like, wait, what is this song about? What is this song about? Because while it seems like the other songs were a little vague but close to an understanding of what they meant, Your House is about a breakup. The Middle is about, not losing focus on the good things in life. The first two songs were about ambition and trying to fight against things, steering you away from that. I had to like come up with a realization of what this song is about. And my conclusion is I think this song is possibly about drugs.
Oh, well, I mean, the way I think about the song, it kind of could relate to what you just said. Because, in my opinion, this song is breaking free from a horrible relationship.
Okay.
So, I mean, drugs is a good metaphor there.
Well then.
This song is one of my favorites off the album. It's the second favorite. We still have yet to reach the top dog here, and I'm curious to see if my favorite song off the album is one that you're going to be like, oh, come on. Let's rewind back into the sweetness. The first time that I heard this song is when we were in college, and someone did a cover of it during My Generation Night. Which, for those of you who are like, what is a My Generation Night? One, I mean, I get it. You didn't go to Geneva College. Well, at least some of you didn't. But two, essentially what that event is like a bunch of students get together and they audition to perform songs that were basically from our generation. I mean, it's a fun time. It's one of the bigger events on Geneva College's campus at the end of the year. But I digress. So the first time I heard this song, it was covered during My Generation Night, and I did not like it because I was just like, oh, this song's stupid. Like, it's very playing off the fact of, like, like call and response, singing, vocals, live stuff. And then a few years later, I got back into the song, and I'm like, oh, this song's actually kind of good. I kind of like it a lot. And then, after seeing Jimmy Eat World perform this song live, I was just like, oh, this song is so good. like the fact that I was able to participate in singing that song live when I saw them recently about a couple weeks ago elevated the song to a whole new level for me, and the overall feel of this song is absolutely fantastic. I would say this track here has the best feel that you can get off of it next to Bleed American, where Sweetness is a track where I can imagine myself driving down the highway to and going 120 miles per hour. But the dizzying effects of just how the vocals are layered upon each other, and how, unless you really listen in or look at the lyric sheet, you really can't understand what the lead singer is saying half the time. But yeah, overall, it is such a good track, man. I can't say enough good things about it.
Neither can I. In fact, you stole what I was about to say about driving down the highway at 100 miles an hour, blasting this thing, because that's exactly what this kind of song is. And what makes this such a great power pop song for me is, again, the beat's great. The guitars are loud and great. At the very end, when they kick that piano in for the last coda, that's just such a classic pop rock move to just have that banging piano at the end of it. That is something that they learned from. You know, they've listened to other tracks and it was like, okay, let's put that in. It sounds good, and it worked. Again, I just based on the sheer power and again the dizzying effects of it, it's number one for me off this album, no question.
It would be an easy number one for me if it wasn't for the next track on this album.
I was wondering if this was gonna be it because peek behind the curtain, listeners. When we record our last episode, the Public Enemy episode, we have debated recording this episode right along because Ryan has this album on vinyl. And I remember you telling me that this song was so beautiful. And the track we're talking about is the, I guess, side A closer, which is Hear You Me, or track 6 on the CD version, and we'll get to that part later. But I'll stop talking, Ryan. You go ahead and talk about why this is your number one song.
So, I know before I saw this song live, which, first of all, they do a beautiful job of performing this song live. It was a fun moment where the whole crowd did the whole, like, hey, we're going to light up our cell phones and, like, you know, have a very tender moment. And the band made a note of it of, hey, we didn't even have to ask you to do that. That's actually pretty cool. Thank you, guys. I'm like, yeah. And even before hearing that song live, I knew of this song before, and I'm like, oh, hey, this is actually a nice song. It's a very good song. So the reason why it's elevated to, like, just to take out Sweetness as, like, my favorite song on the album is this song was actually written for a pair of sisters. Mikkel, might be mispronouncing that first name grossly, which, again, I'm a human being, and Carly Allen. They were both big supporters of both Jimmy Eat World and Weezer, and unfortunately they tragically died of a car crash in 1997. And this song is dedicated to them, and the title, Hear You Me, is apparently a phrase that the sisters use in online forums. So even hearing that and thinking about, like, the lyrical content here of, like, phrases that are like, there's no one in town I know, you gave us someplace to go, and other lyrics of, and if you were with me tonight, I'd sing to you just one more time, a song for a heart so big God wouldn't let it live. Like, when I found this out and I really did a deep dive into this, dude, I actually kind of cried a little, because that is just so brilliantly beautiful that it just has no right to be this gorgeous.
So, that is a great story. I will give you that. And I do think the song itself is good. The one song that I was kind of reminded of a little bit, even thinking about it now, is Plain Song by The Cure. Because it does have that atmospheric vibe of just sort of this expansive feeling, this just very well orchestrated. It's a great, well executed song. It sounds very pretty. It's not in my top 3, and this again goes to the problem that I mentioned a little earlier on, particularly on A Praise Chorus.
Yeah.
Which is that if you don't do your research into why, and I'll admit, when it comes to stuff like this, maybe I should do a little more research, but I'm trying to listen to this album as I do all the albums, just from the perspective of, okay, this is a music album, and this is where we're going. And lyrically, I think it's fine. With the added story, what you said does add a rain. And again, the line of God doesn't let you live, that is a really touching line. But if you don't know the story behind it, it just kind of is there to me. Again, not that it's a bad song, but it's not one of my top three.
So, respectfully disagree. Um, but before I get into my reasons about why I respectfully disagree with what you just said, I do respect how you did approach listening to this album and this song here. Because at the end of the day, like, let's face it, all that um, music and bands and artists have is just what they can bring to the table in terms of like, hey, is this a good song? Because half the time, let's face it, whether you're listening to it on the radio, Spotify, YouTube, or even just Pandora, if you're like 80 years old, like if the song doesn't grab you and you don't like it, I'm sorry if it has like the meaning to life behind it. Like you're not. It needs to provide at least a good foundation for what it can bring to the table. Otherwise, it's just gonna get lost in the shuffle of the 3 trillion songs that get uploaded to the interwebs every single day. That being said, my personal experience with the song was even before knowing the tragic backstory of why the song came into existence. I still appreciated the song very heavily. Like I even remembered the song before hearing it live, and I was just like, oh, even hearing this song live adds a new element to it, and then even more so, it goes up there. Would it be better? Would it if I didn't know the tragic story or if I didn't see it live, would it have taken the top spot on the album for me in terms of favorite songs? I would probably say no. The sweetness will probably be up there, and it might have gotten kicked down maybe further, but it would be on the top half of the album. Maybe like top four or top five. I would have to like do a weird experiment to figure that out. But I digress. I mean, that's just my experience with it. The very nice thing about this podcast is that both me and Matt approach music in a very different fashion. There's no wrong answers. Let's face it.
There's not, and to me, this is a solid song. I'd probably put in the same category, maybe a couple notches higher than Your House. Maybe probably along the same lines as perhaps a praise song. It's probably if it's not in the top half of the album, it's right, no pun intended, near the middle.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like we've done enough talking about Hear You Me. You want to move into If You Don't.
Yes. And this, I believe, it's my turn to take over. And talking about lyrics, the very first note I have on If You Don't is saying that it's much more descriptive than Hear You Me. Because to me, this song is very much a song about particularly this guy dealing with, his relationship or, with this friendship that might be a relationship, but however it is, the lyrical themes that he talks about, like I can visualize in my head him singing about this as he's driving down the freeway in Los Angeles on, a nice clear night where the stars are out and you have all the headlights on the highway going down. A band this reminded me of is a band that you and I have seen live. It's been a decade, but we have seen them live. A band by the name of the Mowglis. Because it has that very sort of descriptive lyricism, sort of that California late night rock feel. And I really do like this track. I would say this is also in the top half of the album for me. And lyrically, I love how it sort of centers around the theme of, do these things that we do mean as much to me as it does to you? And I think it paints a very vivid, picture of that. And again, I think it's a great song.
Absolutely, man. I would put this in the bucket of deep cuts off the album because yeah, it's not really a well-known song. It's not as big of a hit as the Middle, Bleed American, Sweetness, and uh, even if you're like a Jimmy Eat World nerd, you know that the band often leads off their set list live with a praise chorus. So like most fans know that song too. That being said, if you don't has such a good chorus, man. That was the one main takeaway that I came away with the song here is that Jimmy World they really know how to write a good rock chorus like that. I mean, you did an excellent job, just spelling out what this song can bring to the table, and yeah, I mean, I have nothing else. I love this song. This song has great performances, lyrics, story, and that chorus though.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I wasn't like taken. I mean, I'll have to give it another listen, but I wasn't like jumped by the chorus like I was with the likes of Sweetness or The Middle or Bleed American. But if I give it a re-listen, I might agree with you there. But just overall, I like the song for what it is as a whole. And yeah, I think it's a great way to, if you're listening to the vinyl kickoff side too, or if you're just listening to the CD, it's just a good track.
Yeah. So that being said, you ready to move on to Get It Faster?
Let's move on to Get It Faster.
So it is my turn to lead off the track section here, and "Get It Faster" is a very interesting song when it comes to the whole album as a whole, because it's a very swampy kind of song, and it really does. It contrasts well with the rest of the album. Like, it doesn't have that rock elements of Bleed American, The Middle, Sweetness, and it doesn't have the acousticy kind of tenderness of Hear You Me and what Your House tries to bring to the table here. But yeah, this is where the band shows they might have bled a little bit into the experimental side here, because whenever I heard this song, it kind of reminded me of stuff that came off of Clarity. Overall, though, I really dig the song. It's another. I'm gonna put this into the deep cuts off the album that don't they pay off well. But again, we've already went over my top 3 off the album, so it doesn't land there. But there's only one song that lands in the bottom basement of this album. But that being said, the song works well for me.
It works well for me too. I don't think I'm quite as high on it as you are, but I do agree that it does sound very good. It definitely gets a lot closer to the pop punk that would end up defining the later part of the decade. Like, I could definitely hear some Fall Out Boy in there. Another song I wrote down as a reference is What I've Done by Linkin Park. I think these songs sound very similar in a sense. And just the lyrical content about, being desperate for answers, again, whether it's in a relationship or in life, and deciding, you know what, if you're not going to give me the answers, I'm going to go find them myself. And while that is a bleak methodology when it comes to life and definitely relationships, you can't say it's not vivid. You could definitely say that the protagonist of this song is saying, okay, if you're not going to... And I think this plays well, too, with the previous track, because that's what that song's about. It's about, does this mean to you what it means to me? Are we more than just friends? Are we more than just relationship? And here the lead singer is saying, okay, well, if you're not going to tell me, I'm going to try this with somebody else and see how you react, because if you're hurt by this, then we were more than just friends, and if you don't, then we weren't. Again, is this good relationship advice? No, it is not. But
yeah,
in the world of rock and roll, it makes for an interesting piece of, perspective.
Yeah. And also, if you're taking relationship advice off of rock songs, don't.
That's a solid
One
idea.
other, yeah, a couple other notes I'm going to talk about with Get It Faster here is during the instrumental break, I love how the guitar comes in and out with such a staticky kind of flair. That adds a very nice touch for me. And yeah, that's the only thing that I gotta say. Like, I love how the band's performing with loud, soft dynamics here. Yeah, it's just a good, solid track, man. So, that being said, are you ready to go on to Cautioners?
Yes, I am ready to go on to Cautioners, and I will remind everyone who has been listening so far that I have not yet revealed my third song in the top three, and I am still not going to reveal that this is my third favorite song because it is not my third favorite song. This is at the bottom for me. This is my least favorite song on the album.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, okay. Tell me more, tell me more.
So, I've been talking a lot throughout this review about how the songs play off each other. How, for example, Praise Song plays well, carrying the momentum lyrically of Bleed American, and how the middle contrasts that, and how, as I was just saying, Get It Faster plays well off of the song before that, If You Don't, Don't. And again, I'm not sure if this was meant to be a concept album or just a collection of really good songs. But if we're going off the theory that these albums are very much, or excuse me, these songs are playing off one another, then this song has such a ugly passive-aggressive tone in it that I cannot get past. Because this song is basically saying, at first I thought the song was about him saying, I miss you, but you miss me more. Meh. But I think in reality, it's, I miss you, but you don't care. But even aside from the lyrical content, I just think sonically, this is such a meandering song. It kind of just, states its case and then just stays there and doesn't go anywhere. It's a slow burn of a song. It's very tepid. Well, or it's not tepid, but it's just so slow and meandering and almost pointless. Like, even with Your House, like, that was at least a bit more upbeat and interestingly off-putting, whereas this is I've talked about this before. It's a nothing burger. It is a nothing burger. It's passive aggressive in all the wrong ways, and for me, this is right down the bottom of the album for me.
All right, so I feel like this is where we are gonna disagree most on when it comes to the history of our podcast, because I don't hate this song nearly as much as you do. I wasn't anticipating the amount of hate that just came out of your brain there. So a couple thoughts. So one, for your sanity, do not check out their album Clarity. Okay. I'm speaking to you, Matthew, because like this song here is basically what they do in Clarity for some of the tracks. So like you would probably rate that album probably like a 2 out of 10. So I absolutely love this song, and the reason why is the way that it's arranged. It's more of a lean in kind of song for me, where just the different aspects of how the instrumentation comes together. Like, prime example, in between the first chorus and the second verse, the splashes of guitar are very, very nice, and like the thudding bass that kicks everything off is such a nice grounding point. And the whole lyrical themes here, they are really just somebody dealing with a breakup, but trying to make peace with it. And that quiet pain that you deal with where you realize that you love that other person, but you need to move on. And you see that other person moving on too, and that's that awkward transition phase out of a breakup. Do I understand and respect that the song isn't for everybody? Yeah, absolutely, man. Like when it's funny that sometimes I'm known as the lyrical guy within this show here, but on the other hand, like there are songs where it's just very vibey that I can really get behind and really just appreciate, like just sink my teeth into the instrumentation. I mean, prime example, like for those of you who want to really see a prime example of that, pause this pod, go listen to our Cure episode, and just hear me drooling over what that band can bring to the table, and then come back to this episode. But like, another example is like my love for anything that Phoebe Bridgers does. Like she's very vibey. Yes, her lyrical themes are a little bit tighter, as compared to like what we have going on here in Cautioners. But it was just an interesting thing that I just formulated in my brain here.
Yeah, I get that. And ultimately, again, is this the worst song I've ever heard in my life? No. It's just not my least favorite on this album. Again, I think the problem I have with it, just especially when you compare it to the more, I think, focused, and when I say focused, I don't just mean lyrical, I mean sonically. I think If You Don't is more focused. I think Sweetness is definitely more focused. The Middle is more focused. Bleed American. I would say pretty much every other track on here sounds more focused than this. This one, again, I don't hate it. It to me, it kind of is the same way I didn't like Swamp. Because with Swamp off of Speaking in Tongues by Talking Heads, that song wasn't even bad. It was just so far out left field based on what the rest of the album was that you're just like, why is this here? And I can understand why this is here, but at the same time, I don't know if it necessarily should be.
I disagree with that, but yeah.
I understand.
Especially considering like if you've listened to Clarity before, you can see the through line in terms of like musical direction that they go in. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think that they do anything after Bleed American that is using this kind of style. Because I've been, spoiler alert, I've been jamming out to Jimmy World like crazy. So I've become fairly familiar with their discography at this point. I still have to check out some of their later stuff, but I digress. I'm rambling here. That being said, I feel like we've talked about Cautioners enough for one lifetime here. Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah. I agree.
So let's go on to the Authority song. And before I even talk about this song here, you know what was an interesting thing I just thought of, dude? It's the fact that I feel like Bleed American reminds me, like in terms of its sequencing, of another album that we have reviewed and discussed in a previous episode, and that would be Hot Fuss by the Killers. Because you think about it, that album is very front-loaded. You have your big songs that kick off the album, and then the second half of the album is just full of deep cuts, and they have good songs in there. But unless you were really like paying attention and doing like a project like what we have going on here, you're not going to really remember them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I actually that's a very good comparison between the two because you're right. Most of the stuff that people know about this album does come on the first side, and then for those who want to stay tuned, then they want to hear more of this band. They flip over the second side and find some decent cuts there too.
Yeah. So that being said, the Authority song, it kind of goes back into, at least lyrically, the how the band tends to write nerdy stuff about like oh hey, this is me just enjoying music. Here's some references about music. But what I love about this song here is the bouncing rock beat and how the guitars and the drums, they play off of off of each other so well, it creates a nice foundation for what drives this song ultimately. That's just the main thing that drives me with this song, because the chorus here, it's good enough here on its own. Is it one of the best choruses off the album? Not necessarily, man.
So I'm going to disagree with you as far as it not being one of the best choruses on the album. This is the number 2 song for me off this album.
Really?
Yes. And I pretty much like it for all the same reasons that I liked Sweetness. It's just such a fun track to listen to. To me, this is another 100 mile an hour. Well, okay, if Sweetness is 100 miles an hour, this is maybe 80 miles an hour. Just blasting this. I love the chorus. I love the female background vocals on here. I agree the lyrical content is basically just sort of, it talks about having power of the jukebox, and perhaps this is like a memory that the protagonist is having about a time where, he may have had control of the situation, but at the same time he didn't, as it turned out. It is kind of a weird, nerdy song, I will agree with you on that, because who writes a song about putting a song on a jukebox in 2001, the year of the iPod? But that being said, I just really like how the song sounds. I think this is, as far as like B-sides and like deep tracks, like this is something I would definitely recommend to those who like the likes of Sweetness or The Middle, because I think it is in that same vein. I really do.
Yeah. Maybe I would have to revisit the track just to maybe get a little bit more familiar with it. I mean, I'm familiar with it on its own, but it was definitely one of the deeper cuts off the album. I think I would go back to Cautioners, or even If You Don't, if I want to go into a deeper cut here. But that being said, this song is just great on its own. You don't necessarily need to have like a slap your... This song is good on its own. It knows what it does, and it does it well, in my humble opinion. So, you have anything else to add?
As far as the song itself, no, but I do want to point out something you mentioned about how we've talked about going back and listening to tracks. I will say that is something I've noticed over the course of, maybe not all the albums that we've done, but certainly at least one, where my top 3 for a certain episode has changed since. Like, my top 3 for The Queen is Dead by the Smiths were There's a Light That Never Goes Out, Cemetery Gates, and frankly, Mr. Shankly. Not in that order. But since then, my favorite track off that album has been Big Mouth Strikes Again. So, do know, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, are those really their top 3? They are. For now.
And let's be totally honest. What we do here is, when we're talking about like our top 3, our ratings of albums. Like, I rated The Cure a 10 out of 10. Put it on the fridge. Show mom later. But who knows? Maybe 10, 15 years from now, when I'm significantly older and have different opinions about stuff, like it's probably not going to be a 10 out of 10. Like, back in the day, I used to think that Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication was a perfect album, and then I went into like my Simple Plan phase, and I thought they were a perfect band. Do I think those were perfect albums and perfect bands? No, let's be real. But
I was about to say.
Yeah, it's interesting how stuff changes up, man, over time, and how you get more familiar with like different sounds. So that being said, ready to finish off the album with My Sundown?
I'm ready to finish off the album with My Sundown, and before I get into it, I will say that if you ever give anything by Simple Plan a 10 out of 10, there's going to be an intervention involved. I'm just warning you now. So...
Duly noted.
My Sundown is the closer. My Sundown is the closer on this track, or at least it is on the CD version. If you have the vinyl version, it's the second to last track, but we'll call this the last track. It is probably the bleakest song on the album. This definitely feels like a song that is basically the singer just giving up. And whether it is giving up on the relationship, giving up on this past life, giving up on life as a whole, we don't know. It's relatively vague in that regard, but I think this is a very good album closer. And this is and I've been talking about formats. I would say whatever format you listen to this, if you get something with a nice bassy speaker, do it, because the bass sounds great on this track. And to me, I feel like this does what Cautioners should have done. It floats in sort of this miasma of confusion and self-doubt and a little bit of hopelessness, but I feel like lyrically and more so sonically, it's a bit more focused. So I think it's a great way to close the album out.
I absolutely agree, and even thinking about like the other like themes and what was going on with the band at the time, like they got dropped from their label because Clarity didn't sell nearly as well. Nowadays, it's regarded as like the best Jimmy World album, and like you think about how this track goes and how like the lyrical themes are like, hey, like you show them your progress, but no one really cares, and it's reflective of like, hey, we made something that we're really proud of, but no one really cares, and ain't that life sometimes at the end of the day? Like, you can do so much. You could be like, hey, look at what I did. And, like, somebody could be like, oh, that's nice. Well, anyway. But this is a gorgeous track, in my opinion. And you would agree as well. Like, I love how this does carry off the album in a very nice way. It's very. It's the only song on this album, and I think it might be the second song that I know from Jimmy World that has finger snaps in it, which is a very interesting touch because it works well within the context of the song and the track itself. However, it's just, if you take it out, I don't know. I feel like it's a nothing burger because if you take it out, it doesn't really uh, take away from anything. It might even make the track a little bit better, in my opinion. But having it in there really doesn't, offend me or even add anything. It's just like, oh, that's there, I guess. But and another interesting thing about the instrumentation in the third verse, like I was kind of intrigued by how it adds more drums, but the drums almost sound like a drum machine, which is an interesting thing. I would love to hear what the actual sounds that I'm hearing are coming from. Um, and one other thing I'm gonna note about here is that the background vocals here, they work so well, and it like the backing vocalist, I was so impressed with their performance on this track here that I had to pause what I was listening to, and I'm like, okay, who is singing here? Because I got to figure out who they are and what they have done. So, actually, according to my research, it is a lead singer off of a band called Bat Dog, and the lead singer is called Rachel Haddon. And she actually does background vocals in Cautioners, Hear You Me, and let's see, I think one other song. No, that's the only ones that I noted. If I'm not correct on that, I apologize. But yeah, I was very impressed by the background vocals there. But overall, this song is a really great way to send off the album. Yeah. You got anything else about My Sundown?
Not really. Again, I think it does a great job of closing out. And the only other thing I will say too is it's very interesting that you're talking about finger snaps and drum machines in regards to the final track on this very instrument driven album, because that does play. I mean, if you really want to be a conspiracy theorist, saying, "Oh, they're replacing drums with drum machines and other elements with finger snaps," and ooh, is this the goodbye to rock music? I mean, that's a giant stretch, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah. One other thing that I'm gonna note here about the end of the track and the end of the album as a whole is that it basically rides out like the. Let me get a closer look at my notes here. So the song rides out with the vocals saying that no one cares, and it's a nice calm response with the dueling vocals answering back with "I want to be so much more than this." And the way that the whole song ends with the lead singer saying goodbye, it's like a end of a story, and the ethereal instrumentation in the background is such a nice touch. It really wraps up the whole song and the album as a whole, at least in the CD version, with a very nice bow on it.
Agreed. So, yeah, we did it.
We did it, man. We found out what it means to bleed American.
We ate world.
So, that being said, considering that this was my choice of a album for us to review, I will go first in terms of like my overall thoughts about the album, and then my rating of the album. Then I'll flip it over to you. So it's funny how like my relationship with this album has changed over the years. Originally I only turned to this album for the song "The Middle," and then I got introduced to songs like "Sweetness" and then "Bleed American." And then after seeing this band live and buying the vinyl for this record at that show, I have fallen completely in love with this album. Like deep cuts off of here play well, and the tender, beautiful moments like "Hear You Me," "My Sundown," and even songs like a praise chorus where it can get my nerdy brain going. I absolutely love this album. And this album is going to be in my rotation for a very long time, and I am perfect with that. However, it is not a perfect album, in my humble opinion, because Your House exists. And the whole cringe line of "Rip My Heart Right Out," it is reflective of how close this album came to being a 10 out of 10. Because without that single lyric that gets repeated over and over and over again, like, this album's easy a perfect 10 out of 10. But sadly, I have to dock it at least 1 point because of how the rest of the album does an excellent job just like carrying the weight, and songs like "Bleed American," "Sweetness," "Hear You Me," "A Praise Chorus," "Cautioners," "My Sundown." I've named like 6 songs. That's over half the album that are just so freaking good and so freaking beautiful in my opinion that it it lands at a nice beefy 9 out of 10 in my humble opinion.
So again, I don't have the same experience that you have. Again, this is my first real introduction to Jimmy Eat World, and it was a really good introduction. I tend to agree with you that the high points of this record definitely dwarf the lesser points, which for me are "Your House" and "Cautioners." Again, I really like "Sweetness," really like "Bleed American," really like "The Middle," really like the Authority song. I had a lot of nice things to say about the likes of "If You Don't." And to me, the strengths of this album outweigh the weaknesses to the point where I am going to give this an 8 out of 10.
So collectively, that is an 8.5 out of 10 between the two of us, because I can math.
Yes, you can, math.
So that being said, my next album recommendation for those of you who liked Bleed American and where you should go next, I would just say go to their very next album, which is Futures. Has great, like, driving rock songs, has beautiful songs as well. Doesn't really lean into that spacey kind of, like, ethereal instrumentation that you see in, like, My Sundown and Cautioners. but it creates its own beauty in its own way, and the band does experiment a little bit more. And there's no such cringe lyric as "You Rip My Heart Right Out" found anywhere in that album. So that would be my solid recommendation.
And I will go and use the time machine to go back in time for my next album recommendation. It's another very power pop, power punk in a sense, California album. I made a slight reference to it very early in the episode. It is Dookie by Green Day from 1994. And again, just like Bleed American, you could definitely envision the sort of Southern California neighborhood suburbia vibes in that album. It's a little bit on the harder side sonically, and that's not a bad thing. It's 40 minutes of just pure in-your-face punk. Again, some great looks into life like there, like Longview or Welcome to Paradise. Again, I that would be my next album recommendation.
One day soon, we might be talking about Green Day. Who knows?
We may be.
Um,
Father of
we
all.
might be talking about that album. Who knows? Who knows here? So that being said, Matthew,
Yes.
it is your turn to pick the next album that we're gonna talk about. So what do you got cooked up for us?
Well, I am kind of enjoying this kick we're on. For those of you who don't haven't followed us on social media, first of all, do that. Secondly, you may have noticed back a couple weeks ago that we put out a infographic showcasing our first 20 albums that we reviewed on the show. And so for the second 20, I like what we're doing as far as just like jumping wildly from genre to genre to genre to genre. And so I'm going to keep that in tune. And I'm going to choose an album that I'm going to bet to say that you have never listened to. And an album that I have not listened to in probably the better part of a decade, but I do have it on CD and I have it ready to go for us. Just bringing it up so I can reference it. It is from 1985. The album is called Marching Out. It is a metal album by one Yngwie Malmsteen.
I will be honest with you. Out of all the words that you just said, the only thing I'm familiar with is the year 1985.
That's fair.
And obviously heavy metal. So, do me a favor. So the album's called Marching Out. I could probably find it pretty quickly. Yeah, okay. So we're going to go from hardcore hip-hop of the late 80s to early 2000s pop punk to German heavy metal. Like,
Well, I don't think it's German.
Okay,
Yeah.
my apologies.
That's okay. Yngwie Malmsteen is Swedish, but the album was mostly recorded in
it's
California. So there's a couple of songs off there I like, but we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
All right, cool. So do you have anything to add about German, Swedish death metal, Bleeding American, anything as a whole to wrap up this review here of this episode?
Nothing much except I appreciate you pulling this album out because again, I really did appreciate it and got more in depth with James Eat World.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that I'm still on the kick on. So that being said, if you have gotten to this point in the episode and you like what you heard, which is kind of self-evident by the fact that you've gotten to this point and you're still listening to me talking right now, the best way that you can show Matt and I some love is rate us on your podcasting platform of choice. Rate us the highest rating that you can give us. If you're listening to this on the YouTubes, like and subscribe the video and the channel accordingly, and drop an emoji of what you thought about the episode, or if there's a reference that you want to drop there. And if you want to follow us on social medias, we are at TT Hey Listen. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads. refuse to get a TikTok, and it would be weird for us to get a Snapchat because I don't think that's going to be very relevant for us. Um, but that being said, if you have an episode idea, feel free to shoot us a email at ttheylisten@gmail.com. But that being said, for the last time in this episode, I am Ryan Kearns.
And I am Matt Durzik.
And remember these words. Don't write yourself out yet. It's only in your head when you feel left out or looked down on.